Sleep training, here we go. Nights 1 and 2. We already did a video on how we knew we were ready to start sleep training with this handsome little devil right here. So I'm just gonna get right into night 1, how that went, and how night 2 went. We are also nap training. I'm sure if you're doing any kind of research on sleep training, you'll know that you gotta do naps at the same time. It's kind of like a package deal. And they're different. They're different. So I'm gonna do separate videos on the nap training and how that's going. So for now, we're just gonna talk nights. So just to start off, Colton is 4.5 months old. He is exclusively nursing, and we have cut out the night feeds because he is on a great growth pattern. Yes, he is. He's in the 85th percentile for his growth, so he can go all night without eating. And previous to our nap training, he was typically going 6 to 8 hours on his own, and then, as I mentioned in the how we knew we were ready video, that started to really deteriorate the last week before we started sleep training. So night 1, I started our routine at about 6 o'clock, and this is going to take some tweaking. I laid him down at 6:40 p.m. and much to our surprise, he didn't cry. He was crying in my arms. And I laid him down, and he laid in his crib for 8 minutes without crying, just kind of looking around and babbling to himself. Now I do lay him in his crib when I need to put away laundry in his room, or I change the curtains. If I'm doing something upstairs quickly, I will put him in his crib. And I do have like a projectile mobile, which has a base, and I take the top off, so I only ever put the mobile on when I need to occupy him for a few minutes while I get something accomplished upstairs. So that usually buys me 5 or 10 minutes. So he's used to being in his crib, awake and playing at happy times. It's not a strictly for sleep area. So he laid in his crib for 8 minutes. Then he started crying, of course. I went in at 7:02 to comfort him. Now this is just a few calming words that I repeat a few times to him, and I put my hand on his chest, and then I leave the room. He was very angry when I left. And then at 7:09 he started to cry and then stop crying, where he's rocking his head back and forth a little bit. He's really trying to get to sleep. And then his crying kicked up again at 7:11. At 7:17, I went in and comforted him again. So we were going, the first time it was 20 minutes, the second time I waited 15 minutes, and it really angered him again. So at 7:38, he was doing his cry and then sleep and then cry and then sleep. So he's, it seems as though he's starting to wind down. And he did that for about 15 minutes. And then at 7:54, he fell asleep. So in total, from 6:40 until 7:54, it was 1 hour and 14 minutes. So I did read the Sleep Sense program by Dana Obelman. It's a pretty good program, and like I said before, once you start reading about sleep training, most methods are generally the same. They just word it different, They kind of sugarcoat the crying. They use words like this is a gentle method or whatever you're comfortable with, which is totally true. I'm not trashing or trying to talk bad about any of these methods. It's a very difficult time, and everybody takes their own approach. So I obviously was choosing the leave the room approach, and I was finding here, this is another reason why I take notes like by the minute when things change, is so I can see that I'm clearly just making him mad when I go in, and I can see the increments of how things are going. Now, one thing that this was night 1, and this was very hard. I took a few days to prepare myself emotionally, because this takes a big emotional toll on you and your partner and possibly your other children, you know, because all of a sudden this little baby is crying a lot. So I was mentally preparing myself for a couple of days and just, reassuring myself that this is for the greater good. So I was all right. I didn't cry while he was crying, but I did cry a little bit when he went to sleep. Not a lot, just, a couple of tears, I think just releasing the tension. I swear my shoulders were probably like glued to my ears and my back was so stiff, and, it's difficult to watch. But one thing I did notice that made me feel so much better is in this crying, he wasn't hysterically crying. And when I went in to check on him, there was still a little bit of daylight, so I could see that there wasn't, like, his sheets weren't wet from the side, so he wasn't really crying tears. And as he went to sleep, he just kind of shuts off. Like, he cries, he goes through this phase where he's sleeping and then he cries out for a minute and then he sleeps for a minute and then he cries out for a minute, but he doesn't sob. Where a kid gets really upset or has worked themselves up so much and they're kind of like, they can't catch their breath. He doesn't do that. Like, it just kind of turns off. He lays his head to the side and he's asleep all of a sudden. So that just reassured me that his crying was frustration. It was out of frustration that he's tired, he's not asleep, and he doesn't know why there is not a boob in his mouth, because previously that is how I put him to sleep. So that was quite reassuring. So he was asleep by 7:54. 2:50 in the morning, he woke up. So let's just say he went to bed at 8 to 2:50. So let's just say that's 3 o'clock in the morning. So about 7 hours he slept solid. I sent my husband in at 3:10. One of the great things in this book that I hadn't read anywhere else previously was to try and send your significant other in for the comforting part. This really holds true with us because, like I said, Colton was exclusively nursing. So when my husband goes in, this little guy knows right away that there's no boob to be had with Dad. And I don't know if it's just the deeper voice, what it is, but he took to it really well. It seemed to really comfort him. So my husband went in at 3:10, and at 3:15, Colton was asleep. He was awake for 12 minutes, and then he went to sleep for almost 20 minutes. So he was doing his sleep cry, sleep cry, sleep cry at 4:43. So that was almost 20 minutes after he woke up. And then by 4:57, he was asleep again. And then he slept from 4:57, oh, what's the matter, baby? All the way through till 7 o'clock in the morning. At 7 a.m., he kind of just woke up and was instantly crying, which woke me up, and I just shot right up out of bed and went right in his room. I think because of the lost sleep myself, like I personally, when he woke up at 2:50, I did not sleep again until 5 o'clock in the morning when he went to sleep. And then I really needed to nurse him. I mean, if these babies were full, that's for sure. And I'm sure that he was hungry after that, after 12 hours there, he's got to be hungry. So he was groggy. He was very groggy. He wanted to fall asleep on my boob again, but we didn't let that happen. And he did nurse for quite some time. He nursed for probably about 40 minutes in total. Now that's with some burping and a little bit of fussing in there too. And then it wasn't until probably about 8 o'clock that he was really awake and like giving me some smiles. Because typically, previous to sleep training, I would feed him every time he woke up at night. So when I went in the morning, he would be awake for a little bit and just kind of babbling and talking, and then I would go and get him before he ever started crying, and he'd be all smiles and happy to see me, but he wouldn't take a full feed because he had been eating throughout the night, especially in those hours in the wee hours of the morning. It's very, very typical that between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. They wake up a lot, which really stood true for us on the first night. So night 2, he went to bed at 6:45 and he was crying as soon as I laid him down this time. And by 6:57 he was doing his sleep cry. And then Jake was going in and doing the comforting from this point on because it just seemed to work better. I just angered him when I would try to go in and comfort him. And then at 7:23 he was asleep. So 6:45 to 7:23, that was 38 minutes this time that it took him to fall asleep, which is a big improvement over an hour and 14 minutes from the night before. He slept till 3:11 in the morning. Oh, you got my thumb there, buddy. So let's see, so he slept 8 hours, almost 8 hours, about 7.5, a little more than 7.5 hours that night. And when he woke up this time, he was crying, but just like softly crying. He'd have a couple louder cry outs, but typically he was just, kind of more whining, which we felt was a really, really good sign. And by 3:25, he was asleep. So that was only 14 minutes of him softly crying and whining that he got himself back to sleep, which was amazing. Then he woke up at 4:38. So he didn't stay asleep for very long. Again, it was a little bit over an hour, and we're around that 4 o'clock hour again. So he was awake at 4:38. I thought he was asleep at 4:45, but then he popped back awake and was crying, and now he's crying. So Jake went in to comfort him at 5 a.m. And my writing gets a little hard to read here because I'm very tired. I have not slept from the 3:11 until the 5 a.m. Because of course, as soon as I'm just starting to fall asleep, he's waking up again. So at 5:08, he seemed to be sleeping again, but then at 5:23, he was crying. And then he cried until 5:50. So that's, a good 25 minutes of crying there until he was asleep. And then he slept again until 7:11 this morning. So I think that's pretty good. I'm quite sure that 7 o'clock is going to be around his wake up time. Although that, it could lessen once he is sleeping through the night and not getting the broken sleep. Or it could be a little bit more because his quality of sleep is improving. And I will tell you from experience with my daughter, who's 2.5 now and is a great sleeper, and I did my own version of sleep training with her. The more she sleeps, the better she sleeps. It really, really is true. You don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. Doesn't work. That debt is never paid. You want your child to sleep as much as they comfortably can. You don't want to be forcing them to sleep, but a rested child sleeps and goes to bed way better than a tired child. So this morning at 7:11, we gave him a few minutes. I didn't think he was going to go back to sleep. Again, he's hungry. It's been 12 hours. Even though I know he can make it through the night, I know he's hungry. He's not going to go back to sleep. Although he is a little tired when I wake him up, but he was much calmer this morning and very quick to be happy again. And he didn't really seem tired this morning. He wasn't starting to fall asleep on the boob. And like I said, he got happy quicker than it was the morning before. So night 2 I see is a great improvement from night 1. Night 3, who knows? This really, it could progressively get better. You could have a roller coaster. You never know until it's all said and done. So that's it for this video on nights 1 and 2 for sleep training. If you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to continue conversations like this about sleep training anyways, I'm going to compile all of these videos that we make on a playlist, and maybe consider subscribing. Thanks. Bye! Where's my big boy? Huh? Where's my big boy?